Hello.
Hi, is that Mohan?
Yeah, this is one.
Hi, Mohan. This is Sunny Kapoor from Goldman Sachs.
Hi, hi. Sunny.
Is it a good time to talk?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot for taking the time out and speaking with me.
Thank you.
Uh, so I am looking at your resume, Mohan,
Mm-hmm.
because I just got it
Mm-hmm.
maybe an hour or two ago.
Okay.
So as I go through your resume, can you tell me a little bit about your background? Let's start with your first assignment, which was AIG.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Actually, before we go into that,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you tell me what do you like? I know it, but in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
what is DevOps? What do you mean by DevOps? Like, if let's say I am completely novice
Mm-hmm.
to like this terminology of DevOps,
Okay.
and I ask you, Mohan, explain to me what is DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is DevOps?
So DevOps means it is completely development plus operations. If you want me to like elaborate it, okay? So once
Just
the
explain.
picture,
Yeah, what
yeah,
do you
yeah,
think DevOps?
yeah, yeah. So once DevOps comes into picture, before that, what actually happened traditionally, what happens in our company is like they follow this waterfall approach model. Okay, whenever a project or something comes up with the company, they will like terminate something else, and they will plan accordingly everything. And they will plan, like, for example, if a small project comes, okay, they plan like after 6 months I'm going to release this project. So the client has to wait for the complete 6 months, okay, to get to know about what's the state of the project, what's the condition, how it runs, likewise in a waterfall
Mm-hmm.
approach. So there comes this agile approach. So the agile approach, what it does is it simplified everything. Okay, the client interaction with the project is too high when you talk about this agile methodology. So when you talk about this agile methodology, DevOps comes into picture. So previously, what happened is there is a guy like middleware admin guys that we will have this kind of guys. So what's their role is like. Once the developer does all with this code, what they will do is they will build manual, everything manual. They have to use some building tool and they have to do it manually, and then they have to manually store their artifacts, and they have to do it everything manual. They have to deploy it manually. They have to monitor it manually. So everything was manual approach. And in waterfall approach model, so it took too long time. But this agile approach, once this agile approach came into picture, universal DevOps came into picture. So the DevOps automated everything. So automation means, so pulling my code from GitHub, I can automate everything using DevOps tool. For example, you can talk about the CI/CD tool, continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment tool, where you can integrate everything. You can pull your code within a single, like for example, you can create a job. That job will pull your code from GitHub, and it will build by itself manually, and then it can store its artifacts, and it can at the same time it can publish your reports, and then it can at the same time it can deploy it in a deployment server. So this is completely DevOps. You can automate anything.
Okay. All right. So now tell me a little bit about your experience. Let's start with AIG.
Mm-hmm. So I worked on two different projects, as you may see, have seen from my resume. So the first project which I got an opportunity to work with is AIG. So both the projects are insurance related projects. So that since I have been a fresher to that particular DevOps field, I had few roles and responsibility to play with my first project. So most probably what I have been worked on this particular thing was I was working on this Jenkins automation, and the build tool which we have worked on with that is AIG project is Ant build tool. So in Jenkins automation, what I did with my first project is like I have gone with this freestyle approach. As you may know, once you go use Jenkins, we have few different projects. You can either go with freestyle approach project or Maven project or the anything pipeline like project. So we have gone with this freestyle project. So using that
Mm-hmm.
freestyle project, what I did was I automate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my first project. But in my second project, once I talk about my second project, I got an opportunity to work from the scratch. Scratch means setting up the complete DevOps environment itself. I have worked on the second project. So the 7 projects which I have been working right now, it's around for the last 2 years I've been working with this uh, project. That's also a state farm project, a US project, an insurance related project. That's also a retail project. So in this second project, what I did is what my contribution is. I have set up this complete DevOps environment starting from GitHub. I have created GitHub. On GitHub, I have created organizations. On that, I created multiple repositories, and I have created groups, and I have allocated the developers for the groups and shared the credentials with the particular development group to push their codes. So next, talking about the Maven Build It tool. Since in my first project, what was the difficulty we have faced with Ant Build It tool is, so in Ant Build It tool, when you use Ant Build It tool, you have to keep all your dependency files. For example, in Java, if you want to run a Java code, you need jar dependency files. So if you use Ant project, you have to manually download all your Ant dependency files, and you must keep that in your project folder itself. So it is too tedious. So in my second project, our DevOps architects have gone with this Maven approach. So once you use this Maven project, it is very easy. You can just simply mention whatever the dependencies you need. You can mention in the pom.xml file. So once you run your Maven project, automatically what it does is it will download all your dependencies from your Maven center. But in our current project, we haven't gave access to internet to our computer terminal. So what we can do otherwise, we have configured this proxy repository. Through proxy repository, our Maven projects will download all its dependencies. So once you talk about repository, we have worked on this Nexus Artifactory repository that you call it as a private repository. In that private repository itself, we have configured a Maven proxy repository. So whenever you run your Maven project, automatically your Maven will contact your proxy repository to download all its dependencies. And once the project is built, at the end you will get your artifact. So for a Java project, what is the artifact? It may be a jar file, it may be a var file, or it may be a EAR file, enterprise application file. So you need to take a backup of that file. So we have configured this Nexus repository. In that we have configured hosted. In hosted we have configured either snapshot or release repository. So you can take a backup of your artifacts, so your build artifacts in the private proxy repository, So once you take this particular backup, then what you can do? You can push your project to your SonarQube server. So when you talk about this SonarQube server, this is nothing like a source code quality management tool. So what I have done in this source code quality management tool, SonarQube server, is I have configured this quality gates and quality profiles. So if you talk about quality profiles, so in SonarQube server you have many language dependencies. For each and every language, there are certain set of rules. The language which we are working is Java. So for Java, there is around 568 rules are there in this SonarQube server. So we have configured that rules. So once you push your project should go through all the rules. It must satisfy all the rules. That is quality profile. So once you talk about this quality gates, you can configure your code coverage and everything else. So we get this parameter from our client side. So according to our client's request, we'll configure this particular quality gates and quality profile. I have configured this quality gate and quality profile. In my current project, likewise, the project which I am working right now, State Farm, I have configured 378 quality rules. So once you have done all these things, see, you can automate these complete tasks. You can automate in Jenkins. So Jenkins is nothing but an automated tool. Okay, it is a CI/CD tool. You can tell CI is a continuous integration and CD is continuous delivery or deployment. But in our project, we are doing continuous delivery, not deployment. Since we don't have the access to deploy in prod server directly. We have only access until pre-production environment. So we use this continuous integration and continuous delivery approach. So in this Jenkins itself, I have configured Jenkins. Configured means I have installed Jenkins master and I have configured this Jenkins master slave approach. In our project right now, we are managing an approach like 1 to 6. So 1 master and 6 slave servers. So we build the projects accordingly to that particular slave servers. So if you want to talk to me about this Jenkins master slave node, so for each environment, we have configured a node. For example, we are having 5 different environments. One is dev environment, another one is test, UAT, QA, and at last pre-production environment. We pull our code directly from development environment branch, and then first we'll build it to automate the build in Jenkins. And first of all, we'll deploy it, or we'll build this particular thing in dev environmental Jenkins slave. So once it is built over that Jenkins slave, we will directly deploy in dev environmental nodes. So once it passes all the conditions from the dev environmental side, and so once we get a sign of mail from them, dev environmental testers, what we do is we'll pull the particular same code from development branch, and then we'll build it in the different nodes called test node, UAT node, and QA node, and directly from there we'll deploy in that particular environmental servers for software testers. So the software testers will work on automation and that relevant testing kind of environments to go test your particular application, whether it's going to pass all the test criteria and scenarios. So once your application passes that particular environmental servers, what happens is then we'll get a sign off mail from the testers that this particular application is good to go and good to deploy likewise. So at that time, what we'll do is we'll merge our development branch code with master branch, and then at the master branch, now the master branch will have a clean code. So we'll pull that clean code from a master branch, and then we'll build that same code in pre-production environmental Jenkins server. So from pre-production environmental Jenkins server, we'll deploy directly into pre-production environment for testing. Next case of testing. So this is what we do with Jenkins. We automate everything. So once we talk about deployment, we are not deploying this using a traditional approach. In traditionally, you can deploy this application in any application server. For example, Apache Tomcat server. You have this JBoss Wi-Fi, JBoss EAP, WebLogic, these kind of servers. But yeah, we are not going by that approach. We are doing this deployment using Docker containers. So that Docker container also we have integrated with our Jenkins. So what we have done is, once you have built your artifact, we create a Docker image in our Jenkins itself. So we take a backup of that particular Docker image. We call it as a custom Docker image. Normally you will go through this approach, like you can have this custom Docker image in any Docker registry. So what we have done is, we have configured this particular Docker registry inside a private repository, Nexus private repository itself. And we have configured a proxy for Docker also. So once you talk about Docker, it downloads the base image from your public.hub.docker.com to your Docker registry, public Docker registry. But that also, we are not exposing our terminals to internet. So we have configured this Docker proxy repository also. It downloads the base image from Docker proxy repository. And once it downloads the base image, we do customization. And once the customization is done, we keep a copy of our custom Docker image inside this Nexus repository itself. So how we deploy is, we deploy it through Docker Swarm. So why we need a Docker Swarm is, once you deploy your container in Docker servers, you need someone to manage your containers, running containers. So we have gone with this Docker Swarm approach. So Docker Swarm is nothing but a container orchestration tool. It manages your complete Docker containers. For example, if your running container is down by some time, or your complete node is down, automatically your Docker server will manage, and it will create the crashed containers in any one of the nodes. These are all the things I have worked on with my project, and I have worked on this Ansible also. So Ansible, you can call Ansible as a configuration management and deployment tool, but in our project we are using this Ansible only for configuration management, not for deployment purpose. So if you talk about configuration management, in our project environment, we almost maintain 53 servers. So if there is anything you need to do in common in all the servers, you can use this Ansible to configure your servers.
So when you say we have done, like, how hands-on have you done it? Is it like the team that performs and you're part of the team, or what is the stuff that you have done it?
I'm part of the team. So see, I have told, like, the current project which I am working, I have been part of this complete setup environment, and I have worked extensively on this Nexus artifact server setup environment, and then Jenkins, and then Docker environment.
Okay. Now, your primary has been mainly DevOps, which is kind of you can say a release management mainly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, build and release management.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have any experience in production support, production management?
No, that's what I told. In our clients, like our project, we don't have access to this production environment. We have access up to this pre-production environment alone. So once that my application gets okay from the pre-production environment, we'll give access to the client team to pull our Docker images from our Nexus private repository. So they deploy it in their production environment. We don't have access to that production environment.
Okay.
But I love to work with but I love to work with production environment also.
And have you like not working in production environment, like production support? Have you done any kind of production support? Like let's say there are issues and you need to help resolve it.
No, because we have access until this production environment. If there's like on our client side, no, they have a separate team to maintain the production environmental servers, so they will take care of it.
Okay.
And we test the particular application in both our on-prem services and also this AWS environment also.
Okay. So what is your take on, because we are looking for somebody to do some production support as well. So what is your take on that? Like, are you open to doing production support?
Sure. I'd like to do this production support if I have an opportunity to work with. See, like in pre-production also, if there's any issues related to our deployment, automation, these kind of things, we take a look into that.
Okay. But and right now, all the release management that you're doing, are you using some automated tools or it's all manual that you guys do?
Automated, complete automation through Jenkins.
Through Jenkins, right?
Through Jenkins. Once we write the pipeline job, and we do nightly builds. We configure this whole SCM mechanism and this webhook mechanism. Okay, it automates everything. We just monitor.
Okay.
If there is any issue presented to a particular job, then we'll look into it. What's the kind of issue? Whether it's a developer related issue or some automated related issue. If it's a developer related issue, we escalate it to the development team. If it's an automated related issue, then we'll look into it.
Okay. I'm just thinking because I'm trying to think on production support. What should we be looking at?
Sure, I'd like to work with production support also. Like, if I get a chance. In my current project, there is no chance to work with my production environment. If I get a chance, then I will improvise. I love to work with the production support also.
Okay. Now, let's assume you are doing a release and you run into an issue and you find out that there is an issue with the code. How do you go about, like, what are the steps you will take to address that?
So, like, if I configure a pipeline job, let me give you an example. If I configure a pipeline job, then I'll automate this through stages. So once I automate these two stages, the first stage will be like pulling your code from GitHub. It goes on nicely. There will be no problem with that. The second stage is your build stage. So at this build stage, I have an error. Okay, the scenario which you are saying right now, you are having some code errors. So automatically an error will be shown on my second stage. So what we do normally is we'll configure this email configuration. We do an email configuration step pipeline log. Once your job is success or either it's failure on any stage, it will trigger a mail to me as a DevOps engineer, to my lead, to my client side, as well as to the developer who is working on the particular part of code. So automatically the developer will have a mail that this particular project has failed due to some code related issues. Or then once this issue has been seen by my manager, he will definitely raise a ticket, okay, ticket, and it will directly route to that particular developer to look into that. And if something, for example, the code is completely good, but it doesn't cover the standards. For example, it must cover at least in our current project, it must at least cover 85% of code coverage standards. If it hasn't covered that particular 85% of code coverage standard, then we have configured this Jacoco plugin in our Jenkins pipeline itself. So this Jacoco plugin, what it will do is, it will not build your artifact once it hasn't covered all your code coverage. So automatically the developer will get a mail, the client will get a mail, the client might contact the development lead, whoever is working on that project, and normally that particular development will look into that particular code, whoever has worked on that code, and he might rectify that. So as a DevOps engineer, you should not touch that part of code.
Okay. But let's say you go back to the dev team, and you work with the dev team and say, you know what, the code, there is something broken with the code. Like, will you take a deep dive on explaining to them what was broken, or you let them go figure it out?
I let them go figure it out, because you are telling me that this particular thing has gone in this production environment. We will not let that happen in production environment, because once you deploy anything in production environment, you first have to make sure that code is completely clean and it is completely tested until pre-production environment. So as per your scenario, you want me to if I go and assist this particular development team, if my manager permits, then I look into it. Usually in my current project, if anything related to this code coverage or code report things, we will not look into it. We will completely manage this automated environment. If there is anything related to this particular automated environment or DevOps environment, we will look into it. We should not actually touch in that particular part of code.
Okay. Now, have you done any automation yourself? Okay. Do you do any scripting or anything?
Yeah, we do this by using Groovy scripting. In pipeline job, we do this by scripted way. We have used this Groovy scripting to do all this automation.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about some scripting that you have done, something that was automated and you have scripted it?
Yeah, sure. I can go with this Groovy scripting. What we have done, how we have deployed in a Docker Swarm environment. So the Groovy script actually starts with a node. So what does that node refer means? On which particular node you're going to build this particular project? You can mention that in node. So once between nodes in a Groovy script, you can write multiple stages. Okay. So each and every stage will independently run on itself. So how it executes is by a top-down approach. Once the first stage gets passed, then only your second stage build it triggers. Okay. So the first and foremost stage we write in a pipeline script is pulling that particular code, part of code from your GitHub. So we'll configure this GitHub URL, and then we'll configure this username and password for that particular GitHub URL. So that's the first stage I'm going to do with that. So in first stage, it will automatically pull your complete code from your GitHub. Then the next stage is using any build tool, you're going to build that particular project. So I have configured this Maven inside the Jenkins using that global tool configuration. We have configured this Maven. So I'll invoke that Maven and I'll build my particular project. So I have built my project. Next thing, what I'll do is I'll push my project to this Sonar server for the HTML kind of reports. And next thing, I'll configure this Jacoco plugin to check my quality standards. I should make sure that the clean code gets deployed. Okay, if it's not a clean code, if it hasn't covered all the quality standards, it will not be deployed. So the fourth thing, I have configured this checkout plugin. And next, I'm going to build an Docker image. So on which Docker server or on which Docker terminal I'm going to build this particular Docker image. So for building a Docker image, the basic thing you need is a Docker file. So the Docker file is like an input file which instructs the particular artifact to be built. Okay, so I write a Docker file and keep that Docker file in my GitHub itself. So once I pull my code in the first stage, automatically my Docker file also gets pulled. So I'll write a command like docker build command to build my Docker image. Once I have built my Docker image, I must take a backup of my Docker image. So what I'll do is I'll integrate my Nexus Docker registry with my Jenkins, and I'll just pull this particular custom Docker image to my private registry. This is the first step I will do. And the next step is I'll instruct my Docker Swarm manager, okay, to create a service. So if you want to run any containers in a Docker Swarm environment or that Docker cluster environment, you must run this inside a service. So I'll instruct that particular Docker Swarm manager to run this service. So how are we going to run this service? We have two different modes. One is global mode and one is replicas mode. So if you run this by this global mode approach, this particular Docker container, each and every Docker container will be run on all the nodes. One container will be run on all the nodes. Or if I want to go with this replica kind of approach, I can run n number of Docker containers in a single node or on the multiple node itself. So what's the difference between this global mode and replica mode? In global mode, I can't scale up my containers. If possible, for example, there's a scenario. I'm running 2 Docker containers. Now my load is too high. Container load is too high. I want to increase my container capacity. Okay, so I can't do this. I can't do this with this global approach, but I can do this with this replica approach. So usually what we do is in our project, we deploy this particular Docker container using replica approach. So this replica approach is very easy. You can scale up or scale down your containers. So I'll instruct this particular thing in my pipeline script itself to this Docker Swarm manager. And in Docker Swarm manager itself, I'll instruct on which node I want to deploy. So what we have done is we have labeled this particular nodes, and we can pass a constraint in your Docker run command to deploy your Docker containers in a particular set of nodes, or you can run this in all the nodes. Once we have done that, we'll monitor this Docker Swarm manager. The Docker Swarm manager will take care of all the running containers.
Okay.
So once what happens is, once this particular container approach or the particular module has gone through all the tests in our pre-production environment, we'll give access to the production environment team to pull that particular Docker image to be deployed in their particular service, in their production environment service.
Okay. All right. Mohan, I got to run for another meeting.
Sure.
So thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking with me. And I'll get back to Lalita, who coordinated everything from Genpact, and then we'll take it from there. All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.